You are standing at the front of a merchant ship, and dead ahead, the entire world narrows down to 700 meters of moving water. That is not a poetic exaggeration. That is the actual width of the Bosphorus Strait at its tightest point. There is no way around it. There has never been a way around it. Every cargo you are carrying, wine, grain, silk, has to pass through this exact channel, or it does not move at all. For over 1,000 years, this single stretch of water decided who got rich and who got ruined. Not armies, not gold reserves, geography. On the shore ahead of you sits a city that understood this before almost anyone else in history. And once it understood it, the city did not need to conquer the world to control it. It only needed to own the door. That city was Byzantium, later renamed Constantinople. Today you know it as Istanbul, and roughly 48,000 ships still make this same crossing every single year. So how did one city, sitting on a channel less than a kilometer wide, end up controlling trade between two continents for over 1,100 years? The answer starts long before the empire that made it famous. Byzantium was founded around 667 BCE by Greek colonists from the city of Megara. For centuries, it stayed a modest trading post, useful but unremarkable. Then, in 330 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great looked at a map and made a decision that would outlast his own empire. He chose this exact spot to be his new capital. Why here, of all places? Because whoever controlled the Bosphorus controlled the only sea route connecting the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. Grain from the Black Sea coast, timber from the north, and furs moving down from the distant Rus lands, all had to funnel through this one channel to reach Mediterranean markets, alongside silk and spices arriving overland from the eastern end of the Silk Road. By the time Emperor Justinian ruled in the 6th century, the empire stretched across roughly 3.5 million square kilometers of the Mediterranean world, and nearly all of it depended on ships passing safely through this one waterway. The historian Cyril Mango has argued that Constantinople owed less to nature than to sheer imperial willpower, a city summoned into being by one decision, rather than centuries of gradual growth. He was not entirely wrong. But that man-made capital sat on top of a completely natural choke point, a narrow passage that forces all traffic through one controllable space. Is that luck, or just very good map reading? Either way, it worked. Picture your own ship easing toward the harbor now. You do not simply dock and sell your goods. First, you pass through customs. And Byzantine customs were no formality. Officials called komerkiarioi wait at stations positioned at the narrowest points of the strait, specifically so nothing slips past uncounted. What do you think happens to your cargo next? They inspect it, they weigh it, they calculate its value down to the coin. Then they take 10%. This tax was called the komerkion, and it applied to nearly everything moving through Byzantine waters. Where did all of that money actually go? Historian Nicholas Oikonomidis spent years studying the small lead seals these officials stamped onto approved cargo, thousands of which still survive today, each one proof that somebody, somewhere, paid the empire its cut. 10% does not sound dramatic on its own, but multiply it across every ship, every year, for over 1,000 years, and customs revenue from this single strait becomes one of the most reliable income sources any government in history has ever had. You have just handed over 1/10 of your cargo's value to men you will never see again, for the privilege of sailing through water that technically belongs to no one. Does that feel unfair? It probably was. It was also, for a very long time, unbeatable, because the empire was not only collecting money, it was building walls. In the early 5th century, a regent named Anthemius, guardian of the boy emperor Theodosius II, ordered construction of a triple line of fortifications that would come to be known as the Theodosian Walls. How do you fortify a city that already controls the water around it? Completed in stages between 413 and 439 AD, the walls stretched more than 6 kilometers, stood roughly 12 meters high and were reinforced by 96 separate towers. For 1,000 years, no army broke through them by force. But the walls were tested almost immediately. In January of 447 AD, a catastrophic earthquake tore through Constantinople and collapsed 57 of those 96 towers in a single night. What made the timing so dangerous? Attila the Hun was already advancing through the Balkans at that exact moment, and a city with broken walls was a city with an open invitation. The people of Constantinople had two options: panic or rebuild. They picked the second one, and they picked it fast. The four chariot racing factions of the Hippodrome, rival fan clubs so fierce they would later burn down half the city over a disputed race, were organized into work crews and pitted against each other in a competition to finish first. In 60 days, roughly 16,000 people rebuilt the entire wall line and made it stronger than before, adding a brand new outer wall in the process. Attila reportedly looked at the finished fortifications and marched his army somewhere else instead. Across the inner harbor, known as the Golden Horn, engineers also stretched a massive iron chain between two fortified towers, floated on wooden pontoons, capable of sealing the entire harbor shut within hours. Fleets from Arab caliphates, Rus raiders, and Bulgar armies arrived again and again over the centuries. Again and again, the walls and the water turned them back. So what finally broke a city that geography itself seemed built to protect? Not a stronger navy, not a bigger army, a workaround. In 1453, the young Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, only 21 years old, looked at the chain sealing his fleet out of the Golden Horn and made a decision nobody inside the walls saw coming. If the water was blocked, he would not force his way through it. What if he simply went around it instead? Over a single night, his soldiers greased a path of logs across the hills of Galata and hauled dozens of warships overland, launching them into the harbor on the far side of the chain. Historian Stephen Runciman's account of the siege remains one of the defining records of that night, the moment the empire's greatest defense became irrelevant within hours. Here is the counterintuitive part. Constantinople did not fall because its geography stopped working. It fell because everyone, including the people defending it, had spent centuries assuming that geography could only be crossed one way. What happens once that assumption breaks? The choke point was never really a wall. It was an assumption. And the instant someone stopped trying to go through it, the entire strategy came apart in a single night. That lesson did not disappear, along with the empire that learned it the hard way. In 1936, delegates gathered in the Swiss town of Montreux and signed a treaty that still governs this exact same water today. Does any of this sound familiar? The Montreux Convention gives Turkey legal authority over which military ships may pass through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, especially during wartime. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Turkey invoked that same treaty to close the straits to warships from both nations. That same year, the United Nations and Turkey brokered a separate deal in Istanbul, allowing civilian ships loaded with Ukrainian grain to sail safely out through this exact channel under wartime inspection, easing a food crisis that stretched across 3 continents. Your cargo hold, at the start of this story, was not so different. Istanbul today holds more than 16 million people, and this same narrow channel is considered one of the most strategically sensitive choke points on the planet, because it remains the only way for a landlocked Black Sea fleet to ever reach open ocean. What has actually changed since your crossing? Only who gets to stand beside the water wearing the uniform. The American naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan once wrote about choke points just like this one, arguing that whoever holds a narrow passage between two seas holds a form of leverage no army can easily replace. Byzantium was living proof of that idea 1,000 years before Mahan ever put it into words. You started this journey standing at the front of a ship, staring down 700 meters of water that the ancient world was forced to cross. That water is still there tonight. Somewhere on it, another ship is waiting for permission to pass, carrying grain, just like you were, and the empire granting that permission is no longer wearing armor. It is holding a treaty instead. Some things, it turns out, were never won by conquering them. They only ever needed a doorway, and someone patient enough to stand in it.